Hey, you're listening to the Burnt Out Entrepreneur podcast, where you'll learn why you're feeling so burnt out, some insights and hacks to get you along this entrepreneurial journey. I'm Kylie, former oil and gas manager turned health coach, life coach, and business mentor for female entrepreneurs just like you, and help them heal and recover from burnout. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Burnt Out Entrepreneur podcast. Today I'm here with Carla Reeves, who is a coach and mentor, and she's also a podcast host. The name of her show is called Differently, and that really speaks to what we're talking about today, how she took a different approach in her life, her business, and how she looks at productivity. I'm going to be talking about how to unwind the addiction to productivity today. And all of that aside, Carla really she brings a decade of experience because she's helped hundreds of leaders, from corporate CEOs to film directors, producers, all the way to multi-million-dollar entrepreneurs, right? That's what the show's about. It's all about entrepreneurship and how to help them do the work that they love without sacrificing their personal lives, which is the mission of this podcast as well. And again, she hosts the Differently podcast. Look her up. And that's where she helps individuals develop a growth mindset, right? And how to really take control of our lives. Because I know for a lot of our guests who are listening, the reason why they may be so addicted to productivity is because they want the control, right? They want to maintain some semblance of control over their lives. And I think that by having more productivity, like doing more, checking more things off of the list, is going to, it does help us get to our goals, don't get me wrong, but like having such a tight rein on our schedules and our productivity, it can really be a detriment, because that was part of my story. I was trying to shove so many things onto my schedule, like trying to, multitask like a crazy woman. And at the end of it all, I lost connection with my kids. I lost connection with my husband, because I know for me, I was treating them like another commodity, like another time block on my schedule. And, people can feel that. So family felt that. And then my body started to feel that, because I had full-blown adrenal burnout and my body kind of shut down. And that was my wake-up call to really get a handle on what was happening with the burnout issues in my life. So how about you? What was your burnout experience like, Carla?
Gosh. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here with you, Kylie. And so I don't know that I had like one big burnout experience, right? But I think it's been like a series of things going back to, like 20 years ago is when I really started doing work in my life, like realizing that I was always trying to do more, be more, work harder, and like to get somewhere, right? And I realized like that working harder, being more wasn't actually, and checking all those boxes wasn't actually getting me to the place I wanted to go. And so that was a huge pivot point in my life. And then a number of years later, like in really seeking out to I knew in my heart that there had to be a way of doing life differently. And I didn't know what that meant or how that was going to look, but that kind of became my mission like 20 years ago. And then since then, it's been like a series of moments, right, where there was like another pivot or like taking it to the next level. And one of those was actually most recently, but I want to go back to the previous one, which was maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, where I was actually working with a coach, and he had me, after our coaching session, he said, I want you to go track your time. And I had been telling him that I was out to create this extraordinary marriage. And, I was up to all these big things. And he's like, go track your time and come back. And so I came back to that coaching session with my tail between my legs, because I was really embarrassed, because here I'd been saying I wanted this extraordinary marriage. And when I tracked my time, the biggest thing that stood out to me was that my marriage and my husband was getting the breadcrumbs of my energy and time.
Yeah.
And I knew in that moment that I had to make a huge change. And I kind of restructured my schedule to make sure that my husband got like, the best part of the morning, like a best part of my energy, whether it was some point during the day. And I made that big change, and that kind of started to ripple into other areas. And then fast forward to this last year. And my goal this past year, we have 2 sons who we have raised. Our youngest is 18 and just graduated. And so we're kind of entering this new chapter of our life. And my goal this last year was to really live more. Like, I've been building business for over 10 years to create a mobile, flexible lifestyle. And I want to live more while we feel good, while we have our health. And so in the spirit of going after that goal this year, what I didn't anticipate, and I should have, was that I was going to have to address all the things that got in the way of me actually doing that. And that's when I kind of bumped up again against my addiction to productivity and busyness, because sure, I could carve space and time and more getaways and more trips, right? And more adventures on our calendar. But if I'm doing those things and I'm not present, I'm still thinking about my to-do list, I'm still feeling like this urgency and this panic to get back to my work, I'm not living more. And so I had to really address that again this year.
Gosh, I love all of that. And I had someone ask me, like, how do you unplug, Kylie? Like, if you could solve that for entrepreneurs, you get the gold star, or like, because that is the number one thing. I know a lot of us as entrepreneurs, like, well, if I unplug from my business, then my business is going to slow down, right? My business is going to fall apart because I am the business. How do you help your clients when they come to you with that question? Like, well, yes, I know I need to unplug, but how do I, when I pretty much am the business, right? I'm the brand, I'm the face, I'm the everything of the business. Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a big question, right? I'll share it from my own, like what I've done, and then kind of how I help people. But I think one of the things that people, hyperachievers, entrepreneurs, really driven people deal with, and I dealt with, is that I didn't really want to relax. I didn't really want, like, in my mind, intellectually, I know I should, I know it's important, but I didn't really desire it. And so that's really tricky when you don't really need to relax, or you don't really want to relax, or you don't think you need to. And so I had to, in the beginning, really like almost force myself to step away, even if it was for small pockets of time, and kind of start to flex that muscle. And I would have to tell myself, you taking time away and having space for your brain to rest is actually fueling your business. And I'd have to remind myself that. And I still have to remind myself that. And every time I would do it, then I would come back and I would notice that my energy was different, or I had more to actually give to my clients or to my business and conversations. And so with my clients, it's really starting with challenging their thinking around it, and like, first of all, what is it that you're really addicted to? Because it's not really the productivity, right? For me, it was my value and my identity was tied up in what I did from the time I was really young. I was good at working hard. I could show up and I could get a lot done. And I got a lot of accolades for that from a very young age. And so I learned that that's what I do in order to get the right feedback in the outer world. And I was connected to, I was attached to that.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the dopamine hit that we get from those accolades. And I know for me, I was driven by that. Like when I was in corporate, the more accolades that I received, because I was in a male dominated environment, oil and gas, and, trying to match my energy, my strength to men who were twice my size. I knew I couldn't hit that. But where I did, excel and succeed was more on the project management side. So I just drifted on, into that side of the business. And when I was there, because I had found my niche, my self-worth and my value, I was volunteering for all the projects and like, oh yeah, I can help that. And it didn't help that, my male counterparts were having administrative challenges like hi. I would learn it really quick and then I would be teaching, my male counterparts and then they would come to me like, and I would get so built up like, oh yeah, I could totally help you. And then that whole rescue mode started to show up like, oh yeah, let me just help you. And then I ended up, doing their work on top of my
Yes.
own work. And what finally broke the camel's back on that for me was people were taking credit for my work.
Mm.
I'm like, wait a minute, I helped you with that. And then you went and took, the thing that I did, submitted it, and like put your name on it. I was like, what? And I was like, you know what? No, no more Mrs. Nice Girl. Like done with that. And that was around the time where I got the diagnosis. I think the diagnosis really helped put things in perspective because I don't know if I would have picked up on my addiction to the accolades and the pats on the back if the timing hadn't lined up just right. And the other thing that you mentioned was when you didn't want to relax. I didn't know how to relax. So when I
Yeah.
got the diagnosis, the doctor was like, okay, because of my work schedule, he was like, okay, I didn't know that that was the amount of time that they actually have you working to pull you off the schedule. And for 3 months, you're just going to sit at home and let your body recuperate. And I was like, oh, it sounds lovely. What was happening when I was at home, because I didn't get better. I went in for like my next checkup and he's like, your numbers are still really low. Well, what I had done was I transferred that go-getter energy that I was putting out at work and all of the honey-do lists that had been on the back burner. I started to take care of the things in my home that I was too busy to take care of when I was too busy working. And so it ended up happening. He was like, shut it down. Like he was like, you don't do this, you don't do that. And at the time, my kids were in their teens. He's like, you have kids in the home, you have a husband, they can help you do things around the house. And I was like, what? Like, no, they don't do it up to my standard. If I don't do it myself, I end up going back and
Mm.
fixing, what they did anyway. Like, I might as well just do it myself. And so I was in this cycle of doing. And if it wasn't for the diagnosis, I don't know if I would have interrupted those patterns at all, because he said, you can do it however you want to. That's basically what he told me. You can do however you want to. It's your body, it's your life. But if you keep going this way, I don't know where you'll end up in a year.
Mm.
He was he was very forthright. I referred one of my friends to him, and she's like, I can't deal with him. He has no bedside manner. And I was like, you know what? I like him because he's really blunt. He's to the point. He tells me what I need. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So,
And that's probably exactly what you needed. Yeah.
right. And
Yes.
yeah, so that's just a little bit of my story that I resonated with from your story. And
Well, and I
yeah,
think I mean, what you talk about is one, it does take having like a bigger why, right? Like something that's going to really interrupt and call you to like want to take these actions because they're not easy and they're uncomfortable. And just like you said, I see that with my clients where they're going to step back a little bit in the work realm and start to set better, healthier boundaries. But then they start taking that incredible hyperachievers and entrepreneurs have an incredible amount of drive and energy. And so they take that
yes,
and they put it somewhere else, like you're talking about, and then they experience the same exhaustion and burnout. And when you talked about, not wanting to relax, I think in my mind, we think of like, oh, I need to like sit on the couch and do nothing. And that is not, that is not what this looks like. What I have learned is that it's really about learning to work and be productive in a different like a more relaxed state. You start doing everything. And so
yes.
that's like been the real reward of like this most recent change in my life is that I'm learning that I can actually operate throughout the day without this sense of urgency, without my stomach clenched, and feel really, really present to whatever it is that I'm doing, whether it's work or, my marriage or hanging with my kids. And I find that it's easier to transition from one thing to the other. So
Oh,
that's
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Actually, just with this new year, I was thinking about that. And before like dealing with the burnout and really coming face to face with it, I used to use that gut feeling, like that urgency of having to do things as my motivation. Because I'm like, if I don't feel that sense of urgency, is it really important? And I
Mm,
realized I was using that adrenaline to kind of pull me through my day, if that makes sense.
it
And
does.
yeah, instead of, like you said, living in the moment and listening to our bodies, listening to our intuition, letting it dictate, like, okay, well, what do you feel like doing now? And what I realized very recently was when we allow like ourselves to relax, like just like how you said, operate from that relaxed state, we get way more out of it than
Yes.
going like from task to task. And I mean, I preach time blocking and I preach, like doing time audits, or like how are you spending your time? And because I do believe in all of that, there is a sense of flow that we need to operate in as entrepreneurs. And we're not going to get the downloads that we need, to take our businesses to the next level if we're operating from this elevated state. And I don't even know how to describe it. I only know how it feels like I would say like my diaphragm or my solar plexus, right? It just feels like this knot in there, this ball of stress that's there, that's kind of pulling me through my day, like, oh, here, here, here. And I realized the more that I set those tendencies aside, it was easier for me like to operate from that relaxed state, get more done, get more the important work done first, because you will naturally prioritize the things that you will gravitate to those things that you want to do. And for us as entrepreneurs, I know the things that we are most lit up about usually produce the biggest income. If we're doing things from a state, your audience can feel it, your clients can feel it. And when we
Right.
operate from that state of excitedness, not from that pull energy, but from like, I'm excited to show up and do this. Like this podcast, I have been putting it off for years, but showing up every day to do these interviews, this is so fun. Like, what? I love showing up. I love talking to other entrepreneurs about, what's happening in their lives, their businesses, and all the insights that they've gained along this journey and the tools that they're using. Oh, this is what lights me up. And why did I put it off? My brain was thinking, a podcast is so heavy. It just felt heavy. Editing, producing, promoting, and all the things. But when I'm going in and doing all the things for the podcast, it's very energizing and it feels light because it's something that I like putting my energy towards.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
I want to address the other thing you asked, which was, how do we do this when you're a one-man show and you're doing all the things and you feel like your business can't run without you? And I think one is that what I have found in working with clients is that a lot of times when it is wrapped up with our identity, we've actually set up a business that like can't run without us because it fills that need that we need to be needed everywhere. And so when you're in that place, like rest assured you can change this, but I would think about starting small in small places. Like where I started in the very beginning was just I would wake up like a half hour or an hour before anybody in the house got up. So I had a chunk of time that was just quiet for me that I could reflect and really create my day. And think about starting really small. And as you start to reap some of the rewards of creating a little space of like calm that is just for you, I think that will like give you some rewards that will have you want to start to do that in other places. I'm working with a woman. She actually was just on my podcast. She was in that place of, I need to work myself out of a job and actually lead my business. And she
Yes.
shares how her identity was so wrapped up in her business. She had created a world where she's needed everywhere and she couldn't be away from the office. But when we started changing her thinking and kind of challenging her thinking, she found all kinds of places that she could actually step away. And she started doing that, ever slightly. And now she's created where she has Fridays off and she's spending more time with her family, like over, a stretch of time. But it's possible. But you've got to have that why, and you've got to really want to look at your own, how you've created your world such a way. But you can change that world at any time. And, by doing the things
Yes.
that we're talking about. Yeah.
I love that we can change it because we, as entrepreneurs, we create it.
That's right. And sometimes we end up just creating another job for ourselves instead of actually creating a business that we can step away from that provides a lifestyle that we set out to create from the get-go.
Gosh, that's so true. And I notice a lot of times, well, I did it. I worked myself from one job, then I worked in just created another job for myself.
Yes.
You're so used to it, right? Especially if you're
That's
going
right.
from corporate America into starting your own business. And if you're just taking what you did in corporate and then now you're doing it as part of your business, right? Because if you're just monetizing a paid corporate skill, to start your business, it's very hard to get rid of that employee mentality and switch into the visionary mentality that we need as, the CEOs and the drivers of our business. Oh my gosh.
100%. And I
So
mean,
much good.
it has taken me a lot of years to actually live like setting my own schedule. And if I want to step away at 2 p.m. or 11 a.m. and do something different, and to not feel that guilt, that like I'm not operating in that 9 to 5 model, but I may choose to work in the evening now, or I mean, it's like, it's really I'm enjoying that flexibility finally, but it took a long time to unwind from those old models.
Yeah, I hear you 100%. And my husband has a flexing shift working schedule. Some days he's home, some days he's not. And what I realized, I was like, you know what? I can build, because so he will have his weekend in the middle of the week because he has to work the weekend.
Yes.
Like we can have a weekend in the middle of the week if I want to. And
That's
like
right.
he sleeps in, so work in the morning, and then when he gets up, then like we have like a weekend kind of day, and then that's totally fine because we can
Yes.
build our businesses and our schedules the way that we want, the way that it feels good to us. Because when I was trying to like maintain a set schedule, because I'm like, that's what we need to do. We need to stay productive, have a set schedule.
Yes.
When I was doing that, I was feeling the tug because he's just sitting there waiting for me to get off of work. And I'm like, this is not a good use of his time, just on standby waiting for me to finish my work. When essentially, if he's working on the weekend, that's a whole day to myself when he's at work, and
Yes,
I ended up
exactly.
shifting my schedule to accommodate his weekends in the middle of the week. And it just feels better.
That's right.
Oh,
That's right.
and I was shooting on myself like, oh, you're working weekends. Like you own your schedule, you own your life. Why are you working weekends? And it's like, well, technically he's working. So I can work too because I stopped shooting on myself for working like the calendar weekend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really about being innovative, right? Like being an entrepreneur in your life as a whole, instead of just doing it in your business, to really innovate. And it takes time. And I think it takes time to figure out what works for you and what rhythm and flow and schedule. And I
Yes.
also think that you have to be willing to create that when you're in different stages of life. Like I started out as an entrepreneur when my kids were babies. And so I went through so different creations of schedule and, that would work with our family and the
Yep.
dynamics and everything. So flexibility and adaptability is important.
Gosh, I so love that. Yeah. And I do want to go back and touch on your thoughts on how relaxation fits in. I know we kind of talked about it, but is there like a certain like relaxation practice that you do incorporate that leads to increased productivity in your life and your business?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think too that has changed and evolved over time, but for me, like relaxation looks like sometimes relaxation is just like I like to clean my house if I'm in the mood. Like it just takes me out of my work brain and I can just like making my house clean and feel good, like always makes me feel good. Can be sort of therapeutic. I use writing as a tool. I'm an avid journaler and writer. So writing is a really incredible tool for that. I took a visual journaling class like a year or so, and it was a lot of doodling and coloring and drawing. And honestly, when I started it, my hyper achiever self was like, this is a waste of time. But I really learned like just coloring. She called it like a drink of water for the brain. She says our brains are dehydrated. They're so tired because they're constantly thinking. And coloring is really like, it's like a drink of water for the brain. You really relax. Even watching someone paint or color is really relaxing for your brain. Hiking or getting outdoors and walking, movement, exercise, all good things. Gardening, getting in my garden. All of those things are so good.
Yeah. Is that why Bob Ross's TV show was so addicting?
Probably. It's very relaxing. It's
Yes.
incredibly
And
relaxing.
his voice too just draws you in and like, here we are. You
Yeah,
know, and he was very efficient, right? He's like,
that's true.
there's a bird.
Yes.
There's a tree.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I am addicted to the carpet cleaning videos on TikTok. Yeah, it's just you're watching someone clean a dirty carpet. And because, like the algorithm sees I watch one and it keeps
Yes,
showing
of
me
course.
others. And it's just like he's putting water on it, he's shooting it down with some soap, and he's like, so, time lapsed. And I don't know. That's my current Bob Ross
Mm.
addiction, I guess, watching someone clean. I'm with you about cleaning is therapeutic for me. If I'm feeling stressed out, I find myself in auto mode cleaning sometimes, like, oh, I must be stressed out because I'm here cleaning. Like I left what I was doing for the business and I ended up cleaning, and I'll find myself doing that. And I'm like, oh, I must have been feeling some stress. Therefore, that is why I'm now in the kitchen cleaning up the dishes. And it, like you said, it helps us to understand the patterns, right? Our behaviors and our patterns, and what does it mean if we are doing X, if we're doing this instead of that, and how we can use that pattern recognition to really help build newer patterns that are more, you know, I guess productive or conducive to the lifestyle that we want.
Well, and I think too that, you know, this idea of relaxation, it requires you to actually relax inside, right? Your mind, like calm your mind, calm your energy. And for me, that was really hard. Like it was really, yeah, really, really hard. And in July of last year, I started to feel this, next layer of like burnout, right? And I knew I needed to do something different. And I took July to, I literally, I kind of did something, I don't know what you call it, but drastic, I guess is the word. But I stripped away everything in my business that I didn't have to do. And I just focused on taking really great care of my clients and taking care of my podcast. And anything else that was in my schedule that I didn't have to do, I let go. And I learned so much that month because I had all this space and time that I wasn't used to. It was
Yeah.
really uncomfortable. And I felt like a wild donkey inside, like just thrashing, like I didn't know what to do with my time. I encountered emotions I hadn't felt. And I had a commitment to just sit with it. And I wrote I did a lot of writing in that time, and really just got comfortable with not always doing. And what did that mean? What did that mean about me? And who am I if I'm not always being busy? And that was such an important time. And I know not everybody maybe can take a month to actually do that, but I think you could do it on a smaller scale over a longer period of time. But that interruption in my life really, really set the stage for me to then be very intentional about what I put back on my plate, because my business didn't suffer. My business actually, I think, like, I set it up to actually prosper more. And I really took away a lot of just motion that I was doing that wasn't even necessary.
Yeah.
So I'm finding that my business runs without all that extra motion. And then I feel better in my business. And my business is growing as a result of that.
Yeah, I love it. The image that I got when you were talking about the thrashing and versus the ease and grace was, when you took swimming lessons as a kid and you're with the kickboard and you're like kicking and you're like going nowhere. Like you're expending all of this energy kicking. And then, the teacher would come by and teach us how to glide. Like you push off and you glide. And like, wow, I got here just with the glide. Like no thrashing, no kicking. And I got halfway across, the pool with just a glide. Like that's the picture that I got.
Totally. It's such a great analogy.
I can't wait to hear the feedback from the people, because I know there's still going to be some people who are kind of stuck on their addiction to productivity. But if there's one thing that you could leave for someone who's kind of thinking like, okay, Carla, I know that worked for you, but it's not going to work for me because, insert XYZ. What would you say to that person today who is really contemplating if they can give up their addiction to productivity and checking off the boxes?
Yeah, well, two things. One, I would say, is that this doesn't mean you're not productive anymore. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose your edge or lose your drive or never do your to-do list again. I love to-do lists. I have them all over. I love being productive. I love my work. The difference is that I get to do my work in a very more relaxed, calm, energizing, inspiring state of mind. But if you're still like grappling, one, maybe it's not your time. Like maybe you're not in the season to do this. Be on the lookout for when you are. But instead of looking at like, I don't want to give up my addiction to productivity, look at what is it that you do want? And is your addiction to productivity a barrier to you having that? Because I didn't want to give up my addiction to productivity either. I just wanted to live more. And my addiction to productivity was the barrier that I had to address. But for you, it might be something different too. So be open to whatever it is that you're setting out to do in your life. Be open to finding the barriers, whatever that is, to you achieving that. Because if you address the barrier, you're going to move, you're going to glide, you're going to move with more grace and ease to whatever it is you're desiring in your life.
Gosh. Oh, yeah. I feel like there's a like just a calming energy that just landed at the end of this podcast. We want more of that calming, grounding energy. Where can we find you online and how can the listeners connect with you?
Yeah, you can go to carlareeves.com and contact me there. I also set up a piece for your listeners. Yay. And you can find it at carlareeves.com/Kylie Oda. And it's the 7 principles of lifepreneurship, which is this idea of channeling your incredible energy into all areas of your life. And then my podcast, you can check it out on any podcast player, and it's called Differently.
Yes. And like Carla talked about, right? When we want to get off of that roller coaster or that spinning hamster wheel. We have to do things differently. I still love the energy and the vibe of that podcast. Because what is the definition, right? Insanity is doing the
The
same
same
things
thing.
over and over again, expecting a
Yes,
different result.
that's exactly.
We cannot. So go check her out on LinkedIn and on her site, and go check out the freebie. The link will be in the show notes. Learning like how to be a lifepreneur, maybe that will help, make it seem possible to, let go of your addiction to productivity again. Thank you, Carla, for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. What a joy.
Yes, thank you.